Did you know coulrophobia is the extreme fear of clowns? John Wayne Gacy was a notorious serial killer who also performed as a clown. Studying serial killers helps us see inside the mind of these mysterious criminals. In one of my criminal justice classes, I did research on John Wayne Gacy to see the steps that led to his capture. We can see why the killer clown is an interesting case by analyzing Gacy's history, the horrible crimes he committed, and the investigative steps police used when trying to capture him. First, let's talk about his life leading up to his first crime. Gacy had a difficult time during his childhood, but became an active part of his community later in his life. He had an abusive childhood and struggled with his homosexuality. Gacy's father was an alcoholic who used to beat him and his siblings when they misbehaved. Gacy also had a heart condition that made him seem like a failure to his father. Writer Winston Jasic's article titled Closet Case Killer, a New Book, provides an insider's look at America's first gay serial killer. In The Advocate from December 2011 states, "I can't help but think that if his father would have had an ounce of tolerance, John Wayne Gacy as we know him would have never existed." Then Gacy found out that he was attracted to men, but he refused to accept it. Jasic's article also states the authors believe it was this internalized homophobia, an almost pathological lack of self-acceptance that motivated Gacy to kill. Although he had a rough upbringing, he was well known in his community for his accomplishments. He had other jobs, but the one thing he was known for was acting as a clown. Journalist Liam Stack's article titled After 4 Decades, Victim of John Wayne Gacy as Identified as Minnesota Teenager in the New York Times on July 17, 2017, reported that Gacy's neighbors knew him for his appearances as Pogo the Clown at children's birthday parties. On top of that, he had his own construction company which he would use to employ other young men. Stack's article also reported that he had his own self-made construction company, which he would use later on to lure in his victims. Now that we know a little about his history, let's talk about the horrible crimes he committed. Gacy committed many crimes ranging from sexual assault to murder of primarily young men and boys. His first contact with law enforcement was when he was accused of sexual assault. Journalist Amr Madhani's article titled Killer Clown Preyed on Regent in 1970s on USA Today from October 21st, 2014, reported that in 1968, Gacy received a 10-year prison sentence for the sexual assault of 2 teen boys, but was released 2 years later out on parole. Then Gacy was accused of sexual assault for the second time. Madhani's article also reported that a year later he was accused of sexually assaulting another teen, but charges were dropped when the teen didn't appear in court. Then Gacy escalated from sexual assault to murder. He targeted many individuals whose disappearances would go unnoticed. Journalist Jessica Stewart's article titled Another John Wayne Victim ID'd, Ending Family's 40-Year Agony on CNN from July 20th, 2017, said Gacy was known for trolling areas around Chicago looking for men who were either gay, alone, or looking for work. He would take his victims to his house where he would murder most, if not all of them. Gacy racked up a total of 33 kills. Liam Stack's article also reported that Gacy sexually assaulted and murdered 33 young men and boys, burying 26 of their bodies in a crawl space in his home. The rest of the victims were either buried in a different location or thrown into a nearby river. Now that we know about the horrible crimes he committed, let's talk about the investigative steps police used when investigating him. Once Gacy became the prime suspect, it wasn't long until the police started investigating him, which would soon lead to his arrest. It wasn't until Gacy's final murder that the police considered him a suspect. Gacy's final murder was Robert P.S., a 15-year-old boy who worked at a pharmacy. Journalist Chris Perry's article titled Where is Jimmy on CNN from November 30th, 2018 reported that the day after Robert P.S. went missing, the police visited Gacy at his home. Gacy let the police into his home and they searched. Perry's article also reported that in their first search of the house, police found interesting items such as handcuffs, which he probably used on his victims, and a receipt from the pharmacy where Robert P.S. worked. This information made Gacy their prime suspect. After not having found information to arrest Gacy, the police set up surveillance outside of his house. However, Gacy knew he was being watched, and he invited in the detectives into his house to mess with them. Perry's article stated that Gacy invited 2 detectives who were watching him into his house, and one detective noticed a smell that they missed on their first search. This smell led to their first search warrant. While the police were watching Gacy, other officers were investigating the families of those missing and other employees and Gacy's construction company. Perry's article also stated that officers learned when interviewing Gacy's employees, the other employees that worked for Gacy had disappeared. This information led the police to search Gacy's house, where they stumbled upon 26 of Gacy's victims. Gacy was arrested and then executed for the murder of 33 young people. To conclude, Gacy was a horrible person who did many horrible things. He was a serial killer who, because he acted as a clown, was known as the Killer Clown. He had a difficult childhood and he committed many horrible crimes. Unfortunately, it wasn't until his last murder that the police finally considered him as a suspect. Gacy's past crimes and the amount of time it took for police to catch up to him is why Gacy is known as a notorious serial killer. Thank you.